see. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Now
I
I've got
didn't think that
recordings.
I had sound either. And all of a sudden it was there.
There we go. All right, I've got us recording now. And I know Marianne's coming. I know Colleen is coming. There are quite a few other people that have said that they were going to come. So we'll wait a little bit for them to join. But how have you been enjoying the book?
Good.
You like it?
I downloaded mine on my iPad because Amazon, it wasn't going to ship till the end of February. And I was like, what?
Oh, my goodness. That's ridiculously long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, we'll be done with the book by the time I get my book.
Exactly. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're able to
I was able to get it at the library.
What's that, Linda?
I was able to get it from the library.
Oh, very nice.
Oh.
Good. Very good. Hey, Nancy. Oh, there she is. Look at you. Good to have you here, sweetheart.
Just got them from Amazon.
You just got him from Amazon. Yay, we're little twins. Yeah, it's I do like doing some of my books on my iPad, and I did my Bible study that we're studying now, Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, which is a really great book too. So I'm enjoying that. He's such an eloquent writer. Hey, Ruth Allen, how are you, honey?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Did Marianne give you my phone number?
Yes, she did. Thank you so much.
Okay, good.
I'm going to call you soon.
Absolutely.
For sure.
That's wonderful. Terrific. Yep, we've got a couple more that I know that said that they were going to be joining us, so I want to wait for them to come in, and then we'll kind of do a little bit of a recap of what we've already started or what we've already read, and then we'll get into chapters 6 and 7. I was trying to be ambitious and get through 3 chapters in a night, but I think we need a little bit more in-depth coverage, and so I think just a couple at a time is going to be good. And then we'll do it this week of 2 chapters, and then next week we'll finish out the lies that mislead and derail us. So I'm excited about that because it's so true. The things that we're made to understand. And hey, Peggy, and that hi, honey, and that we're told that we're believed, and we're it becomes what we think is true, and it really is not. And it becomes a standard that we live by, and we're really doing ourselves a disservice. And I just think that that's so fascinating. So, Peggy, we're just saying hello for a little bit here. There's a couple more people that I know were delayed, and I want to make sure that we can all be together to get them started in with us. Any exciting news in your neck of the woods?
Nope.
Nope. She's all good.
I can't speak.
Oh, are you sick?
Mm-mm.
No, you just are hoarse. Or you have somebody there, you have to be quiet. Yes.
So do I need my notebook?
The workbook, you mean?
The workbook, yeah.
Not yet. We're not there. We will need it, but that's going to be later on. It's kind of designed to go through the book and then go through the workbook. And we'll go through a portion of the workbook, but then the rest of the workbook is really intended for you to use as your documentation, and kind of is a great way for people to go through the 65 and a wake up if they haven't done that already. So hang on one second.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Of course. I was going to sneeze, and then, of course, it went away. You know how that goes. Okay. All right. So let's start with the recap, and then they can come in and jump in with us. Okay. So like I said, we started out with the one thing. We talked about the domino effect and that how we can make some tremendous changes by doing small things at a time. The workbook will be exciting to do. Yes, I agree, Peggy. And then we talk about how success leaves clues, that there are things that you will see that make it easier for us to understand how it works and what the one thing can be or should be. And then now we're in the section of part 1 called The Lies They Mislead and Derail Us. And starting out in chapter 4, the one lie that we were told is that everything matters equally, and that is absolutely false. And so with that, we learned you need to go small. Don't focus on being busy, but rather focus on being productive. Allow what matters most to drive your day. And go extreme. The core activity goes at the top of your success list. We're going to learn more about that tonight with what we're covering about why that's so important. We're learning to say no, not now, to anything else you could do until your most important work is done. Again, we'll find out the reasoning behind that. And it's really kind of fascinating. I didn't think about it until I read it literally on the pages. And then I began throughout the week to watch myself and watch my behavior to see how that rang true. And I want to hear from all of you if you picked up on that too. And don't get trapped in the checkoff game. If we believe things don't matter equally, we must act accordingly. And doing the most important thing is always the most important thing. Then we learned about the lie of multitasking, which we all have thought over and over again that we're supposed to be able to. The truth is multitasking comes from a concept about computers, and those computers would actually do tasks alternately and not at the same time. And somewhere down the line, it was changed in context to mean simultaneously. And so the truth is, whenever we do things at the same time, something is going to be dropped. Something's not going to be done well. And that's the problem. That's one of the lies of multitasking. Distraction is natural. We want you to realize that everyone gets distracted, and we all have different ones. There's different things that happen. You may have kids running around. You may have pets. You may have in-laws. You may have a job. You may have chores. You may have whatever you need going on that can be a distraction. And we all vary in how that all functions. Okay. All right. And multitasking takes a toll, and that toll is determined by the difficulty of tasks that you're changing between. So if you're doing something that is very intensive and then trying to change and do something else and then come back to it, it'll take you longer to get back to the place where you were. Whereas if you're doing something very simplistic and you're changing gears and then coming back, it's going to take less time. But the truth is, there is always a loss in there. There is a commitment that happens of time difference, but also in capability. Distractions lead to poor choices, painful mistakes, and unnecessary stress. So remember, all of us that go through stress, okay. Remember, all of us that go through stressful times, that often you can reduce your own stress by stopping that all-powerful bad multitasking concept. Distraction undermines results. When you try to do too much at once, you can end up doing nothing well. So not only can you do things badly, but nothing is going to get done well. Figure out what matters most in the moment and give it your undivided attention. It's never possible to do multitasking effectively. Okay, so before we get started into Chapter 6, are there any questions or comments that anybody has? Just unmute yourself or raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or type it in to the little message box.
Hey, Pamela. Last year I took 2 weekends and a full day with JT Fox, the world's #1 wealth coach. And one of the things he talked about was that, again, the to-do lists are wrong. He said that we spend too much time trying to do our to-do list. So what he taught us to do, and I don't do it, but I should, was to take like a composition notebook, and on one side, on the left side, write business, and on the right side, write personal. And you could put all your personal things that you want to remember on the right side, but he said on the left side, you want to write down several things that you want to accomplish that day. But then once you write those down, figure out the one thing that needs to be done to move your business forward that day, and then do it right away.
Thank you. Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, in Chapter 4, we talked about it in the part of everything matters equally, which is one of those lies, that to-do lists can be good and can be very bad, but they're a good way for you to help carve out those important things, and to be able to narrow it down to the one most important thing. So you can have a to-do list, and they can be a could do, a could do, a could do, and then a should do item. And so those should do items should become your part of your success list. So I like that idea, Linda. So thank you very much for that. Okay. All right. So going on to chapter 6, splitting it up. Great idea, Linda. Yes, exactly. A disciplined life. It's one of the most prevalent myths of our culture, self-discipline, says Leo Bubauda. There is this pervasive idea that the successful person is the disciplined person who leads a disciplined life. That's a lie. The truth is, we don't need any more discipline than we already have. We just need to direct and manage it a little bit better. Success is not a marathon of disciplined action. Achievement doesn't require you to be a full-time disciplined person where your every action is trained and where control is a solution to every situation. Success is actually a short race, a sprint, fueled by discipline, just long enough for habit to kick in and take over. Oh my goodness, boy, did I have a breath of fresh air when I read that part, because I have never in my life run a marathon. I am not a marathoner. I was a gymnast. I was a cheerleader and a dancer. I can do sprints. I can't do marathons. And even just this concept of you having to be able to do something forever, ever, that whole part was a daunting idea for me. So the idea of a sprint where you could do the important things quickly and correctly and get them finished, as opposed to having to do them forever and a day. That's where we get caught up. And often we realize that the time it takes to get the one thing done takes a lot less than what we make it up in our minds to be, right? We think, oh, if I do that, it's going to take a long time. Hang on one second. Hold on. Excuse me. Sorry about that. I knew that was going to be coming. I think
Bless you.
Thank you, Marianne. Okay, so it's a sprint fueled by discipline, just long enough for habit to kick in and take over. And that's what we talk about in 65 Days in a Wake Up, where it's a disciplined behavior that becomes a habit. We need the habit of doing it, and we need just enough discipline to build the habit. Discipline and habit powerfully connect to form the foundation for achievement, regularly working at something until it regularly works for you. When you discipline yourself, you're essentially training yourself to act in a specific way. Stay with this long enough and it becomes routine, a habit. Frustration shows up and resignation eventually sets in if you are going at this the wrong way. You don't need to be a disciplined person to be successful. In fact, you can become successful with less discipline than you think for one simple reason. Success is about doing the right thing, not about doing everything right. And I've heard this over and over and over again, right? From colleagues, from team members, in my own mind, the little jerk that sits on my shoulder that I need to punch in the nose, right? That you need to do it all right. And that's not true. And believe me, the message gets through even if you don't do it perfectly. If it's the right timing for the person that is on the other side of the table, it's going to work no matter how bad you mess it up. Okay, I want you guys to really understand that. We don't need to be perfect. There are no perfect people. Okay, there's only one who walked this earth who was perfect, and none of us can live up to that standard. So we do the best that we can, and we share what we know, and we love people, and that's what will shine through, because remember, we're fostering the relationships with them, right? So choose the right habit and bring just enough discipline to establish it. Do we have a question? Anybody have a question? No? Okay. All right, so you'll be a person who used selected discipline to build a powerful habit. Now, he goes in to talk about Michael Phelps, who of course is the magnificent swimmer. And what he became was a person of selected discipline. He spent all of his time in the water, and he channeled his energy. And so he focused on the one thing that was important. And that discipline was swimming daily. The payoff from developing the right habit is pretty obvious. It gets you the success you're looking for. Your life gets clearer and less complicated. Yay, how about that? Because you know what you have to do well and you know what you don't. So understanding and defining that one thing is going to help simplify your life, not make it more complicated or difficult. It's going to help you. It's just doing those things every single day, like the 2 coffee shop interviews and the 1 3-way every single day for 66 days, to the point where it becomes something so rote that you don't ever not do it. And you kind of can step out of yourself and say, oh, gee, isn't that interesting? There's Pamela doing a coffee shop interview standing in line at the supermarket. And you begin to notice it in yourself as you're doing this. And then you think, oh, I do have this. I've got this, because we go through those periods of self-doubt of thinking, I don't know if I can handle this. I'm so exhausted. And then all of a sudden you realize it's really kicked in, right? So when you do the right thing, it can liberate you from having to monitor everything, because you don't have to spin all those plates anymore. You just need to focus on the one thing. And the truth is, Michael Phelps found his sweet spot, and we can have that sweet spot as well. And the truth is, 66 days can give you the sweet spot with discipline and habit. The right discipline goes a long way, and habits are hard only at the beginning. So when we start the process of going through 65 and a wake up, in the beginning, it's like you're dying, right? I don't know how in the world I can talk to 2 people every single day. There's no way I can manage this. And it becomes this overwhelming thing that you think is so hard until you keep doing it day in and day out. That's why when people have to go back to day 1 because they've missed a day, they're going to be better because they are now continuing that process. And we'll talk about that sometimes it might take a little bit longer for a certain person or for a certain activity. It all depends, right? And so doing it for an extended period of time is never going to cause you harm. It's only going to help you to be even better. Over time, the habit that you're after becomes easier and easier to sustain. Habits require much less energy and effort to maintain than when you begin, right? It's kind of like driving to a location that you go to all the time. I think we've talked about this before. You're in the car and your mind is wandering, and all of a sudden you end up at your destination and you kind of think, how did I get here, right? And how did I get through this? Well, it's the same thing going through this process, because all of a sudden it just becomes naturally a habit for you. So you want to, put up with the discipline long enough to turn it into a habit, and the journey will feel different. Lock in one habit so it becomes part of your life, and you can effectively ride the routine with less wear and tear on yourself. The hard stuff becomes habit, and the habit makes the hard stuff easy, right? I love that. So the hard stuff becomes habit, and the habit makes the hard stuff easy. So where you thought it was difficult and daunting, now all of a sudden it just becomes something that you do every day. So how long do you have to maintain that discipline? And there are many schools of thought, but the whole idea that came up with 65 and a wake up was this average, right? It's the moment when a new behavior becomes automatic or ingrained, which is also called automaticity. It takes an average of 66 days to acquire a new habit, and the range is 18 to 254 days. The 66 days is that sweet spot. And easier behaviors take fewer days on average, and tough ones take longer. So if you think it's going to be tough, it might take you a little bit longer, right? But if you think, I can just do this one day at a time, that easy task, that easy discipline will become a habit much more quickly. And often we've seen people going through the program and training that halfway through, sometimes 1/3 of the way through, they all of a sudden have a mental shift and things become simpler. So it's a lot easier to manage. Okay. It takes time to develop the right habit, so don't give up too soon. Decide what the right one is, and then give yourself all the time you need and apply all the discipline you can summon to develop it. And here's what's really fascinating is that there was some research done that showed a halo effect around this habit creation. I found it myself I can brush my teeth twice a day, but flossing is a hit and miss. So you're saying you sometimes forget about doing that? Yeah, right? And so that needs to become a habit. The brushing, because you don't want to have stinky breath, is going to be important and have a pretty smile, but sometimes the flossing gets left behind, right? Okay, so let's see. And I'm goofy because I like brush my teeth like 6 times a day, because every time I go into the bathroom, or I just always go brush my teeth, because that's just, I think from having braces, honestly, that's what did it for me, was that and I never had cavities for the whole time I had braces and after I had them. So I think the brushing is an effective habit to have. So what they found is this halo effect is that of the students that were studied, those that successfully acquired one positive habit, they reported less stress, less impulsive spending, better dietary habits, decreased alcohol, tobacco, and caffeine consumption, fewer hours watching TV, and even fewer dirty dishes, right? So it makes your whole life better when you start creating good habits. And what it does is it makes you feel good. Then you don't need stimulation from outside sources. You feel good because of the work that you're doing, right? You feel good because of the habit that you formed. Sustain the discipline long enough on one habit, and not only does it become easier, but so do other things as well. Those with the right habits seem to do better than others. They're doing the most important thing regularly, and as a result, everything else is easier. So the big ideas for this chapter are: don't be a disciplined person. Be a person of powerful habits and use selected discipline to develop them. Build one habit at a time, because success is sequential, not simultaneous. And this is why we broke down the 65 days in a wake up from the follow-up portion at the beginning, because you can't go through and be adept. It's, again, that's multitasking. You need to first be able to get through that coffee shop interview. And that's why we will kind of waive the 3-way aspect in the beginning, because you need to be able to give yourself a chance to grow and have that kind of as little steps happen. So you can first get down the coffee shop interview, be able to talk with people properly, then you can bring in the 3-way, then you can work on the follow-up. And so it becomes this process, and each time things get better, it makes it better for you. So use selected discipline to develop a few significant habits one at a time over time. And give each habit enough time. Stick with the discipline long enough for it to become routine. Habits on average take 66 days to form. Once a habit is solidly established, you can either build on that habit or, if appropriate, build another one. And if you are what you repeatedly do, then achievement isn't an action you take, but a habit you forge into your life. You don't have to seek out success. Harness the power of selected discipline to build the right habit, and extraordinary results will find you. Okay. So that is the end of chapter 6. Do we have any comments or questions about any of that so far? We're good?
I'm just
Here's what I want to say.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Did you want to talk?
I'm just thinking about like New Year's resolutions where people list 5, 10, 15, 20 things, and then by the end of week 1 or week 2, they're not doing any of them. And this would help them to just choose one. And when that becomes a habit, then do another.
I agree.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I already have the habit of interviewing. But what I don't have is the habit of posting it on 65 and a wake up. So I'm like 4 days behind, though some days I have 3 and 4 interviews. And so I have to create the habit of posting that day. That's what I need to build.
So that's the discipline you need to focus on for the habit. And that's really important because the documentation is part of that next step going into the follow-up, right? So we need to be able to do the documentation there. If you're not documenting with the accountability of the group, then what does that mean as far as your documentation and accountability to yourself at home, right? Because we all do that. I know that. I know that I'm better if I know that somebody is saying, you need to get this done, you need to pay attention and do this, and we're watching you, and we're cheering you on, and we're here to help you. But if I'm all alone in my little room and I'm doing my stuff, then it's just not as powerful. I really think that the concept of a rising tide raises all ships, and that is so important for us to work together. But that documentation is key. So does that mean you're going back to day one, or are you still pursuing? Where are you now?
I am. Well, I'm going to put all my interviews in and then keep on track.
Okay, good.
I have my interviews, so it's not that I'm not interviewing, and I have them all like on my calendar.
Okay, good.
So.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh my gosh! But I didn't realize how far behind I am.
Isn't that funny? I know.
Okay.
Marianne, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I saw your posts in 65 and a wake up, and they seem to all say February, but the right day of the month.
Oh.
Wow.
All in January.
Oh my gosh, you are so good. You're so
documenting
good.
ahead of time. You're not behind.
Let me tell you, if I get through February, it's going to be a miracle.
Well, we also have the tack trip in between, and that's going to take us away for a little bit.
I have another event that's not a longevity event, but it's another event that I'm working with Tom and Denise on. And it's so funny because she, like, at one point, she said something about the event and the date. And I'm like, no, that's not the right event. That's a different event. And so anyway, but I'm also helping coordinate and organize that. And that's like the next weekend after I get back. Oh, yes. March, I'm going to have to take a whole month. But anyway, I'm like falling into bed.
And February's short. We're already here, and there's 28 days. So
I know. And I still have to call some of my team to get them to help them qualify. I love.
For January, you mean?
Yeah, for January.
Yeah. I know. Okay.
All right.
Onward and upward. Okay, so chapter 7, willpower is always on will call. And remember, this is a lie, right? So this was really a powerful visual for me. Odysseus understood how weak willpower actually is when he asked his crew to bind him to the mast while sailing by the seductive sirens. Think about that, okay? He knew how weak his willpower was for these beautiful, seductive sirens to take him away from his task at hand, that he had to tell his crew, tie me to the mast. Wow. Okay? That's what we as colleagues in 65 and a Wake Up do to each other. We tie each other to the mast, keep us on the straight and narrow. Those times that we give the love and encouragement, and the time that we give the little kick to say, you know, this is what you can do. You've got this. You can make this happen. You know, it's really important to be able to embrace each other and tie each other to the mast because we do get distracted. So why would you ever do something the hard way? Why would you knowingly get behind the 8 ball, deliberately crawl between a rock and a hard place, or intentionally work with one hand tied behind your back? You wouldn't. But most people unwittingly do this every day. When we tie our success to our willpower without understanding what that really means, we set ourselves up for failure, and we don't have to. Where there's a will, there's a way has probably misled as many as it has helped. Widely regarded as the singular source of personal strength, it gets misinterpreted as a cleverly phrased, one-dimensional prescription for success. But for will to have its most powerful way, there's more to it than that. Construe willpower as just a call for character, and you miss its other equally essential element, timing. It's a critical piece. Okay, so it's not just the character part, it's the timing part that is so important. Okay, so for most of his life, he said he never gave willpower much thought, but once he did, it captivated him because the ability to control oneself, to determine one's actions is a pretty powerful idea. Base it on training, and it's called discipline. But do it because you simply can. That's raw power, the power of will. And that seems so straightforward. Invoke your will, and success will be yours. And then he went on to say, sadly, it didn't need to pack much for it was he didn't need to pack much for it was a short trip. He said he was on his way, but he wasn't going to be going far. As I set out to impose my will against defenseless goals, I quickly discovered something discouraging. I didn't always have willpower. One moment I had it, the next, poof, I didn't. Who has had that other than me? Anybody else ever have that? You feel you can conquer the day, right? Anything is possible. And then the next morning you wake up and you think, oh, I can't do this. I'm not going to make it. You say that, Ruth Ellen? Has that happened to you? Yeah. It's that sensation. It's this roller coaster, but there's a reason for it. And there's a time where you need to be loving and kind to yourself, but there's also a way that you need to discipline your timing so that your willpower can function at its best. He said his willpower seemed to come and go as if it had a life of its own. My initial thought was, what's wrong with me? Right? That's how we feel. We get stressed. We go, what is wrong with me? Was I a loser? Seemed I had no grit, no strength of character, no inner fortitude. I gutted it up, bore down with determination, doubled my effort, and reached a humbling conclusion. Willpower is not on will call. My willpower wasn't just sitting around waiting for my call, ready at any moment to enforce my will on anything I wanted. I had always assumed it would always be there, that I could simply access it whenever I wanted to get whatever I wanted, but I was wrong. Willpower is always on will call is one of those lies, right? Now, he goes on to tell this adorable story, and I can just... When I first read it and I heard toddler torture, I thought, oh, good grief, what are we going to get into now? But it's hysterical because it's talking about young children being able to wait for 15 minutes and showing what willpower they have with candy sitting right in front of them. And they're left alone with a marshmallow they couldn't eat. And the kids engaged in all kinds of delay strategies. I do too love this, Peggy. From closing their eyes to pulling their hair and turning away, can't look, hovering over, smelling them, and even caressing the marshmallows. My happy little marshmallow. I just loved it. And then he goes on to say, on average, the kids could hold out for less than 3 minutes. They're supposed to wait for 15 for the scientists to come back in the room because when they did, they were going to get an extra treat. So they had to wait. Only 3 out of 10 managed to delay their gratification until the researcher returned. Most kids struggled with delayed gratification. Their willpower was in short supply. The children who had successfully waited for that second treat seemed to be doing better, a lot better. And what was interesting is that he found over the course of time with them, willpower or the ability to delay gratification was a huge indicator of future success. Now, this is really, really, really important, okay? When you meet somebody for the first time, don't throw up on their shoes. Okay? Delay the gratification of sharing with them because it's going to benefit you tremendously in the long run. If you do it right there, it's gone. That precious moment disappears. That's why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, because we listen and we connect and we have an intimacy level that's elevated, creating a relationship. And then you go back and you create more of a relationship. And then you go back and you finally have found that particular point, and no, it is not the 3rd time's the charm every time. It could be the 7th time. It could be the 10th time. It could be the 20th time. But you have to wait. Delay the gratification, because you're going to get so much out of it when you do. Okay, that is the big, big, big ticket item of this particular chapter, for me anyway. High delayers fared better. They go on to say that low delayers were 30% more likely to be overweight and later suffered higher rates of drug addiction. All good things come to those who wait. When your mother told you that, she wasn't kidding. So if you can be patient and you can be a good listener, be kind and be loving, in the end, it's going to come back to benefit you and the other person tremendously. Yes, Nancy said, Eve in the Garden of Eden. Yes, you don't need that apple. You have everything else in the world that you can have. Leave that apple alone, right? Willpower is so important that using it effectively should be a high priority. Unfortunately, since it's not on will call, putting it to its best use requires you to manage it. Willpower is a timing issue. Although character is an essential element of willpower, the key to harnessing it is when you use it. Willpower has a limited battery life, but it can be recharged with some downtime. It's a limited but renewable resource. Okay, I'm going to stop and talk about adrenals for a moment, okay, because there are 2 storehouses of adrenals in your body, the cortisol that it provides in your body. One has got an absolute limit, and the other has the ability to be increased. Okay, when you have the one that has the ability to be increased and you start to run out of that, your body is going to go over and use the limited resource. Once you've gotten to the bottom of that barrel, you're going to bottom out and go into what's called adrenal fatigue, right? Willpower is kind of the same way. You need to make sure that you tap into it when it's at its best so that you don't lose the resource in the middle of something that's very important. So if you get yourself caught up in other stuff and then try to do something that requires a high level of willpower, you might go in the middle and kind of fall apart. Okay, so that's what I want you to understand. It's so important, the timing. And if you remember, everybody always said, my goodness, Pamela, you're up at 3 and 4 in the morning. Because if I woke up and rolled over and I'd be, laying in bed for a few minutes, I'd pull up my phone, I'd start going through the posts for other people. I would start preparing and planning for my day. And that way I knew that I was starting off on the right foot, so that when I came throughout the day, I had that available to me. So that's why for me, it was very important to get that done first thing in the day. Okay. So we act as though our supply of willpower were endless. The same with our cortisol levels. With cortisol, when you have high levels of stress, you're using that cortisol in your body. As a result, we don't consider it a personal resource to be managed. So we take advantage of it. We're not giving it the love and attention it deserves. When we need our willpower the most, it may not be there. Just how fleeting can our willpower be? The more we use our mind, the less minding power we have. Willpower is like a fast twitch muscle that gets tired and needs rest. It's incredibly powerful, but it has no endurance. Remember we talked about the sprint versus the marathon? It's the same kind of a thing. So you can have the ability to go run real fast for a short period of time, but you can't sustain that. That's the same thing for willpower. Have you ever had something happen to you during the day that is draining mentally? You have stuff that goes on. You have circumstances that happen. There are things, divorces, arguments, things, bad things that can happen throughout your life that can really tear down your ability to function at your best capacity. And so you can be going through these things and you just don't have it. It's just not there. So that's why you need to make sure that you get the right food, the right sleep, and use the resource at the best time when it's at its highest level, right? And what's interesting is that decisions will tap our willpower. So the more decisions that you're making, the willpower levels begin to drop. And the more critical the decisions are, the greater the drop will be. So little bitty things, you might take away a little tiny bit, but something that's a big deal is going to really drop that down incrementally. Okay, here's an interesting fact. The last in, first out theory is very much at work inside our head. The most recent parts of our brain to develop are the first to suffer if there's a shortage of resources. Older, more developed areas of the brain, such as those that regulate breathing and our nervous responses, get first helpings from our bloodstream and are virtually unaffected if we decide to skip a meal. The prefrontal cortex, on the other hand, feels the impact. Unfortunately, being relatively young in terms of human development, it's the runt of the litter come feeding time. Okay, so think about this. When we're talking about breathing and your nervous responses, those are those parts that you cannot survive without, okay? So you're really going down to those basic needs first. The part that makes you be a higher developed being needs the least amount of care, and it's going to get the least when everything else is requiring your full attention. So have you ever been so tired that you feel stupid? Has anybody else had that? You're just like, I can't even, my brain is fried, right? I just can't even handle it. I'm done. I'm toast. Stick a fork in me. I'm done. Whatever. But yes, that's the truth, because you get to that point and this part of your brain is not going to work. And you just need to okay, it's time to recharge, time to take a break. Participants who exercised in willpower showed a marked drop in the level of glucose in the bloodstream. So it does take a lot of energy, food energy, to use your brain. Willpower is a mental muscle that doesn't bounce back quickly. If you employ it for one task, there will be less power available for the next unless you refuel. And this is where the old concept is so true, food for thought. Right? I love that. I love when those little things that you think are like little wives' tales or the old grandmother story, and they are so literally true. Foods that elevate blood sugar evenly over long periods, like complex carbohydrates and proteins, become the fuel of choice for high achievers. Literal proof that you are what you eat. Right? When our willpower is low, we tend to fall back on our default settings. Oh my goodness, this is the next biggest point of this particular chapter. Okay. The results are most likely tied to the mental toll of repetitive decision making. High stakes and the assembly line rhythm demand intense focus throughout the day. The default decision, this is where they were talking about judges and the different time of day where the judges are making decisions as to whether or not pardon someone. And so if they were at the critical time where they were tired or right before they were going to go eat, their default would be no, to not let them get the parole. And so when in doubt, the willpower is low, the prisoner stays behind bars. I thought that was really fascinating. And so, it's kind of the thing, you want to be first in line. It's kind of like going to the dentist. I'd rather go early in the morning or to a doctor's office, because by the time, if you go later in the day, first of all, they're going to be dealing with a barrage of appointments and they're going to be delayed, but their level of ability to function at their greatest capacity, I think, naturally diminishes. It's not a determination of whether or not they are good at what they do. It's just truth in how we function well. So if you're not careful, your default settings may convict you too. When our willpower runs out, we all revert to our default settings. And this is the big question. What are your default settings? If your willpower is dragging, will you grab for a bag of carrots or a bag of chips? Will you be up for focusing on the work at hand or down for any distraction that drops in? When your most important work is done while your willpower wanes, default will define your level of achievement. Average is often the result. Okay? So we need to give it the right time of day. We lose our willpower not because we think about it, but because we don't. Without intentionally protecting it every day, we allow ourselves to go from a will and a way to no will and no way. But there are degrees of willpower strength, as we've talked about. There is willpower and there is won't power. Most people bring won't power to their most important challenges without ever realizing that's what makes them so hard. Okay? Have you dealt with anybody when you're giving them direction and you're telling them what they need to do and they just won't do it? Right? They can't. They just won't. They're bringing that won't power instead of the willpower because the guy on their shoulder has been telling them for far too long that they can't. So then they believe him and then they won't, right? And so that's what we need to be able to overcome is that won't, the bad guy on the shoulder. We're probably setting ourselves up for the toughest possible path to success. So how do you put your willpower to work? You think about it, pay attention to it, respect it. You make doing what matters most a priority when your willpower is its highest. In other words, you give it the time of day it deserves. So I want a little interaction here. So if you unmute yourselves and you can talk about what do you think are things that will tax your willpower?
No sleep.
No sleep. Very good. Anybody else?
A lot of stress.
A lot of stress. Yes.
A lot of stress.
Yeah, icky.
Dealing with multiple personalities.
Right? Right? Sometimes from the same person, right? We don't know.
Yes. Literally. Yeah. No,
Mhm.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
There's 9 people in my house.
Oh, really?
So
I will add you
Yeah.
to my prayer
Yeah.
list.
thank you. 2 of them are 1 and they're fun, but it's like, oh my God.
2 of them are 1. That's cute.
They're
Twins?
fun
You have,
ones.
are these twin? Who are these? Twin babies?
Grandchildren.
Twin grandbabies.
Yeah.
Bless your heart. And they're living with
Mhm.
you. Are
Yeah.
pets there too?
I have 1 pet.
So there's
My
10
son. Okay. Yes.
because they have a
Yes.
personality too. They're they're a
Please.
perpetual 3-year-old in the
Add a
house.
little-
Oh my goodness. Anybody else? What other things can tax your willpower? What do you think?
Health issues.
Definitely. Thank you, Nancy. Mm-hmm. Colleen?
How your family perceives you, I guess. You know, like you always been the black sheep maybe listed. So you're always trying to make yourself not be what people have perceived you to be. You know, that you know you're better than what they perceived you. So you try to delabel yourself.
And
give
that
yourself
is
a better label.
That is really hard, right? Especially when it's some people that should be the most loving and the most supportive aren't. And that's really takes a lot of willpower to be able to shield yourself, put on that armor to protect yourself from the barbs that come, and to be able to, because what happens is we become so drawn to those negativities, it becomes our point of focus. And if you focus on that, then you're going to be completely distracted and miss the good stuff. So avert your eyes and turn to the positive thing, right? And then you focus on that, and then you'll see more of that become evident. That's the whole point, is that don't look at this, because if you keep looking for that, if you keep looking for problems, if you keep looking for negativity, that's what you're going to find. but if you switch,
Yeah.
then you will find the positive stuff. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay.
Tons of sense.
Okay. Anybody else? Linda, do you have one too?
No.
No.
I keep writing down notes. I got so much out of this chapter.
Oh, good.
This
I'm
chapter,
good.
there were some good things, and then some things that weren't so good. When he talked about the prefrontal cortex, I had a brain injury to my prefrontal cortex, and the doctor that did the test, he said, you have a very high IQ, but the problem is that you have this injury to the prefrontal cortex, and that has to do with not only the focus but the relationships and some other things, and so that makes things more difficult for me. When he was talking about the delayed gratification, all I could think about when I was reading that was fasting. And I just was listening to Andrew Womack do a teaching, and he said, when you fast until your body gives up asking for food. He said, don't make it just till sundown. If you're still hungry at sundown, just say, okay, then if you're going to keep asking for food, I'm just going to say no and keep going until your body just gives up asking. And he said, you teach your body that you determine when the gratification is coming and not it.
I love
And
it.
so I was thinking about that when I read that part of the chapter.
Yeah.
And how, there are so many good things about fasting that we're just learning now. Instead of just obeying when Jesus said to do it, now people are going, oh, really? Maybe I should fast instead of just obeying it because the word said to obey it.
Absolutely.
So
And
I had that, and then
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. You go finish your
Go
thought.
ahead. And then the other thing I was thinking about was the working with willpower. And I even used that today. I went, I should go work on the basement. I got delayed in getting down there this morning. And then I just thought about it, and I went, I have absolutely no mental or physical capacity to do this right now. And just because I should have doesn't mean it's the best use of my time right now. And so I sat down and I wrote a blog instead.
Oh, I love that. And
then
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is good. And you know what? I go through that today, through every day too, where you really need to prioritize the things of the day, making sure to do what is most important or what is the most critical thing to do. And that's where we're talking about narrowing down this one thing that's so important. So absolutely. And we all should do that. There are some times where you just need to be good to yourself and say, I can't do that today. I need to be able to do something else. And sometimes shifting gears completely and doing something different from the activity that you had planned, but you can't handle. I have found in myself that once I've accomplished something else, that it will help me to say, you know what, I can do that thing now, which is really fascinating. And I was part of a program that I went through with Mark Januszewski, where you rewarded yourself for simple things that you do and are, and really, really done beautifully, and different mnemonic devices of color and shape for a very simplistic mind that help you to be able to remember those things. It really is important to reward yourself and to recognize the things that you do and are well. So the other things that he says that tax your willpower: implementing new behaviors, filtering distractions, resisting temptation, suppressing emotion. Ooh, that's a good one. Restraining aggression, suppressing impulses, taking tests, trying to impress others, coping with fear, doing something you don't enjoy. Oh my goodness, is that hard for people who hate their jobs and then try to come, right? That's a toughie one. Selecting long-term over short-term rewards. That's that discipline and holding out and waiting. for the good thing to come. So every day, without realizing it, we engage in all manner of activities that diminish our willpower. Willpower is depleted when we make decisions to focus our attention, suppress our feelings and impulses, or modify our behavior in pursuit of goals. We have willpower leaking everywhere and none left to do our most important work. Willpower must be managed. Timing is everything. You will need your willpower at full strength to ensure that when you're doing the right thing, you don't let anything distract you or steer you away from it. You need enough willpower the rest of the day to either support or avoid sabotaging what you've done. And that was a wow moment for me as I read that. Make sure you have enough willpower to support or avoid sabotaging what you've done. That's all the willpower you need to be successful. So if you want to get the most out of your day, do your most important work, your one thing early before your willpower is drawn down. Since your self-control will be sapped throughout the day, use it when it's at full strength on what matters most. The big ideas for the chapter: don't spread your willpower too thin. You have a limited supply. Decide what matters and reserve your willpower for it. Monitor your fuel gauge. Full strength willpower requires a full tank. Never let what matters most be compromised simply because your brain was underfueled. Eat right and regularly. Time your task. Do what matters most first each day when your willpower is strongest. Maximize strength willpower means maximum success. Mind your motivation. Your motivation, attention, and beliefs about your willpower also impact your self-control. Don't fight your willpower. Build your days around how it works and let it do its part to build your life. Willpower may not be on will call, but when you use it first on what matters most, you can always count on it. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 7 and our study for today. We have a couple minutes left. If anybody wants to ask any questions or add any more comments, it's been a fun night. Anybody? No? Okay, so
I enjoyed this.
you did.
I'm sorry. No, I just had no idea about willpower, until I read this chapter. I thought about it, like you said, like you just call it, oh, that's my willpower. I started I'm doing the Rev 90, and so I'm sitting at my office, there's all kinds of stuff around, and so I just didn't understand until I read this how you can really manage your willpower, right? Versus some days it's working, some days it's not. So Absolutely. That was eye-opening.
I like that. Yeah, it will control you unless you control it, right?
Right.
Yeah. Ruth Allen?
I just really enjoyed this. I had a lot of wow tonight. I haven't read the whole book because I just started. I kind of am behind, but I'm going to reread all of this and I'm going to highlight because a lot of it is just like, I don't know. It's like somebody's hitting you on this, like when you need a V8, right? You're like,
Yeah. And just so you know, I don't read ahead. I read what we're reading and I read it several times throughout. So my friends in college used to tease me because they said after I finished reading a book, it was a lot heavier than when I started because I do first with a one color highlighter, then I use another color highlighter to underline, and then I write my little notes. And so I think you need to be able to go back and we learn by layering, right? We need to layer it. And Marianne came up with a great idea after we're done with our book study that we were talking about, wouldn't it be great for us to go through the Longevity University together as a group to be able to understand what that's all about? And I think that in order for us to be competent at what we do, we need to be able to do something repetitively, right? Practice makes perfect. So when we do things repetitively over and over again, and when we do this together, a book study, or when we learn something together and we bounce it off of each other, there may be something completely different that one person found, or their experience was valid and very applicable to ourselves, that we just didn't get it, and that the V8 moment might come in what somebody says here. And we go, oh my gosh, that's so profound. I didn't even catch that part, but that is like really, really my truth, you know? So anyway, so next week we're going to read chapter 8, A Balanced Life, and chapter 9, Big is Bad. And so we'll do those 2 chapters, and it'll take the next 2. Oh, we'll have next week, and then the week after we'll have a break because we'll be in Cancun for the tax trip. So we won't have our book study for Wednesday, which is that Valentine's Day? Yeah, I think that, no, the day after Valentine's Day, Thursday. So it's the Thursday we travel getting back, right? That's it. Well, you'll still be staying. Marianne's going to stay an extra day and have some Ken time, right? Peggy says, let's see, thank you so, oh, I love you. And I love hearing your voice, but I understand perfectly that you couldn't share your voice today. So I look forward to seeing all of you throughout the week, and back here for the book study next Thursday at 8 p.m. Be blessed, and I love you all.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you so much for being here. God bless.
Appreciate it, Pamela.
Thank you.